podcast one shot where we cover things that couldn't be part of the actual podcast. With me is the petty dabbler of the dark arts, the authenticator, aka the Dalton L. Mortimer.
Yes, hello and good evening, everyone. It's Bob again.
I am your host / madman with a computer, the brainstormer of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight? So we're covering a video on the upcoming Joker movie, a video by someone we had covered before, a Mr. Movie Bob of The Escapist. This video is titled Joker Already Has Awards Buzz and Controversy. We're basically going to watch and review it, give our thoughts and opinions, and also argue our points against Movie Bobs.
He does actually manage to make a few decent ones towards the end of this one. I know it's shocking, but even Movie Bob occasionally makes good points.
Okay. There we go. 1 second. We gotta close a window here. Okay. Let me get this enlarged here. Annotations. Okay. Well, okay. I also have the captions on in case people need to read what he's saying. Okay. Oh, this was 3 days ago. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. I feel like we just gotta say this. We do have to stop every 20 seconds because of YouTube's algorithm thing. So.
Yeah. DMCA rules and bananas.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas most superhero and/or comics adjacent blockbusters tend to avoid showing themselves to the entertainment press just
Banana.
Yeah.
before release in order to keep the plot spoiler-fever and marketing-friendly boiling point, Todd Phillips' Joker has already been seen by dozens of the international film media's most prominent voices, and also just people with the right connection, a full month in advance at the prestigious Venice Film Festival, and the reactions are already pouring in. Not for me, of course. I don't get to fly to Italy to see movies early, though sometimes I do get pizza, which is not remotely the same.
Bananas.
Wah, wah, wah. I know that was intentionally, self-deprecatingly unfunny, but still. Womp.
I am going to open my soundboard. But, pizza.
Because pizza is Italian food, hence the...
Oh, no, I get it. I get it. I just, I'm hungry for pizza right now since you said it. But, it's neither here nor there.
Interesting fun fact, most of what we call Italian food is actually rather foreign to Italy. Most of what we call Italian food was created by the influx of Italian immigrants to places like New York.
Yeah. I actually looked up, I actually had to do a project once where I covered a history of a food. I liked pizza, so I chose pizza. And turns out, like, the earliest incarnation is, well, it's from, like, the Persian, I believe, Persian Roman Wars.
Yes.
Where they would bake bread on their shields.
Mm-hmm.
Do something. Again, keep in mind, this was, like, my freshman year I covered this, so it's a little hard to remember.
When I had to do a similar project, I decided to do Cajun and Creole cooking, and that was a very interesting project as well. But fun fact: most early pizzas did not contain tomatoes because people thought that the tomato was poisonous because it's in the nightshade family.
Interesting.
So if you're like me and you enjoy garlic pizza more than standard pizza, you might actually be being slightly more traditional with your pizza consumptive ways.
Mhm. Okay, moving on.
Anyway, that's of course not the only way Joker is meant to be different from other modern comic book movies. A pilot project for Warner Brothers' DC Black Label brand of alternate take adult skewing spin-offs disconnected from other DC movie continuities. It supposedly aims to reimagine the character of the titular Batman nemesis in a stark real-world context without superheroes or plot device sci-fi chemical baths, with Joaquin Phoenix playing a Joker who starts out as a
Banana, or in this case, pizza.
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like we should talk about like the whole DC Black Label thing.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that that DC was I wasn't aware that DC was actually intending to transplant Black Label from the comics over into the movies.
Yeah,
It makes sense to start with a movie like Joker because it's very heavily dripped in like Oscar bait seriousness and Scorsese references. So yay!
I don't know. It's weird to me on the fact that they're saying that this movie can't technically be like it's. Honestly, I don't really think it's that much different from a regular comic book movie. Just not like storytelling.
No, it's not. It's the fucking game they play. Any comic book movie that's too legitimate needs to have some reason not to be considered a comic book movie because we still can't consider comic book movies a valid form of art. Sigh.
Yeah. So.
So
But yeah, no,
basically, any movie that tries too hard to be legitimate and also a comic book movie somehow gets rendered not a comic book movie because we say so. And
but
any movie that
the part
doesn't do well is epitomizing a comic book movie, I guess, somehow.
the part of it that kind of not bugs me, but it not exactly intrigues me either. It just grabs my attention is that it's adult skewing spin-offs disconnected from any other DC movie continuities. I mean, I know we give crap a lot with Zack Snyder's stuff, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say, in all intents and purposes, that is um, adults in a way. Like with in terms of theme and
Yeah,
overall stuff, themes, choices, and kind of characters. I mean,
right.
granted, he does. Zack Snyder does not get those characters, but
Yeah, his version of adult, quote unquote, was being a preachy '90s hot topic edgelord with a bargain basement understanding of Ayn Rand. But I'd go a little bit further, actually. I don't think there's any need to focus comic book movies on adults because comic book movies, much in the same way as comic books were and are originally, are for everyone. And adults are a subset of the category we refer to as everyone. There's nothing more or less adult about Joker than there would be about the Marvel movies. The Marvel movies are a bit lighter in tone, but have you ever seen any romantic comedy ever? Don't tell me that movies targeted toward adults can't be um lighthearted or positive in tone. That's sort of what defines a quote unquote feel good movie. One of my all-time favorite movies of the last decade or so um is a movie called Her, uh which coincidentally also starred Joaquin Phoenix. Um and that movie is very much a straight up, no holds barred romance. So yeah, movies that make people feel good can be adult oriented just in the same way as movies that are all dark and grim and dramatic and crap. There's nothing more or less adult about any given movie from any other movie unless it's specifically targeted to alienate adults and infatuate children. Usually, however, movies that are specifically intended to infatuate children while alienating adults are just straight up not good movies.
right.
And what you'll find is movies that are targeted towards everyone tend to be good regardless of who their main demographical audience is. That's the essence of the family-oriented movie. It's it's kind of what Spielberg specialized in over the years. And of course, he sold out and feels now the need to crap on comic book movies as well, but we've already been down that particular rabbit hole. It's the pot calling the kettle black, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Or in this case, the pot calling the kettle black label. I'm sorry. That pun was terrible, even by my standards. Yeah, I earned it. I'm sorry. Okay, but anyway, banana.
Well, I didn't have a point is that I wanted to bring up Shazam.
Okay, sorry.
Just kind of before we move on, I wanted to bring up Shazam.
Yeah.
While it is, all intents and purposes, directed more to a child audience, like a demographic of children.
Yeah.
It does, like, adults can enjoy it too. I enjoyed it. I mean, granted, I'm still in that kind of mid phase of being a child and a teenager and an adult.
Yeah.
But I can understand the themes and ideas that have been presented there, like abandonment, family, finding a family, and stuff like that.
And there are moments of Shazam that are straight up dark. And
like example, and this is one that comes to my mind automatically when I think dark moments of Shazam. Billy almost being killed via drowning by Dr. Savannah.
yeah, that gets pretty dark. And side note, Bob, I know you know this because you grew up in roughly the 80s, I would imagine, or late 80s, early 90s at best. You, I'm sure, remember movies like Labyrinth, movies like The Dark Crystal, movies that, despite their alleged targeting toward children, are dark as fuck. And much in the same vein as many other cinemaphile people of your age group, Bob, I would imagine you do not dispute that those types of movies are undisputed classics. And Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, if anything, proves that you can still have a child-oriented universe with dark moments. So what exactly where is the line between childhood and adulthood in your mind, other than because I say so? Because, Bob, I'm afraid because I say so is not an argument. You actually need to explain your terms if you want to use exotic, highly subjective terms like that.
If I were to describe childhood, like in my own terms, how I describe it is obviously kind of a naivete of innocence that makes you see the world as bright as it is, and you haven't really experienced like how tough and harsh the world can really be, like the reality of it. While adulthood, maturity, well, no, not maturity, because you can be mature and a child technically. So.
Yeah, I think if anything, ourselves are probably the primary examples of that, because I know for the longest time I was referred to as an old soul, quote unquote, and I imagine it was much the same for you, although maybe not in those explicit terms.
I think I mentioned this once before. I think I had mentioned this once before that I was a friend had told me that I'm like an 86-year-old in a 17-year-old bike. That was like 3 years ago. So.
Yeah, and I since about the age of 9 have been being told by family members, friends, and basically anyone who cares to opine on the matter that I'm whatever age I am, going on about 75, which, to be fair, is perfectly accurate, at least internally speaking, and given that I have a physical disability that requires me to walk with things like canes, walkers, and wheelchairs, is probably physically more accurate than most as well.
Yeah. I mean, it
But
doesn't.
my point is, I think in a lot of cases, adulthood and childhood are ill-defined cliches that people use to either inflate the importance of something or dismiss the importance of something just because they want to. And it's intellectually sloppy at best.
Hmm. So yeah. So it's the fact that you think that this, honestly, I know I've said it a few times. Is I don't think this is not exactly a Joker movie. Not even. I'm going to, and don't feel free to disagree with me if you want. I don't really feel like this is a. I don't feel, again, my opinion. I don't think this is a comic book movie. It's very much a. It just lacks something that normal comic book movies have, I guess.
To be fair, though, you have not seen the movie yet, so
Right, right,
that may
every
very well
right,
change.
right. So my opinion can't change on that, but at the moment, I just feel like it lacks that kind of heightened sense of reality that even
And
like
see, what I think of when I think of comic book movie is not necessarily that. What I think of in terms of comic book movie are two things: pulpiness and things taken to their um most noticeable extreme. And in that vein, I find there to be nothing wrong whatsoever with with calling Joker a comic book movie because it is a period piece and it very much has the atmosphere of a period piece. That sort of takes care of the pulpy aspect of what I would define as a comic book movie. And knowing what I know based on the script or the leaked script, which, despite being an early draft, I have read, and all of the critical reviews I have watched, I think the intensity is also going to be there,
right,
and the intense sort of emotional drama is the best this movie has to offer in terms of things taken to their most um, highlighted extreme.
right.
So I have
Um,
no problem with this being considered a comic movie. And also, um, I know the director said that he didn't take anything from any one particular Joker origin story, but he also said that he took bits and pieces from all of the respective Joker origin stories. And speaking as someone who is both very well versed in comics and very well versed in movies, what appears to be happening in the Joker is they are doing his backstory from the Killing Joke using the trappings and the themes and the structure of a Scorsese movie by the name of King of Comedy.
right. Um, I think it's for me is that it, again, I my opinion might change. It's just based on everything I've seen and heard about it. It's, and I do feel like I didn't properly explain myself. I could see this being a comic book movie and stuff. It's more of, I feel like it does like the elements that make a comic book very interesting to me, at least. Like the certain elements of like the kind of wackiness and like this is something you would not really think of. Like the whole falling into that chemicals thing. That's kind of one. It is kind of important to the Joker's character and like his creation. And I get
Mm-hmm.
it's obviously a different version. I'm not going to argue that. I'm just saying like I think that is what solidifies Joker, and not just paint on face or something.
I don't know. I suspect if this is done correctly, this will become a fairly definitive version of the Joker. In fairness, I actually look at Joaquin Phoenix's Joker kind of like the next step or the evolution of what Christopher Nolan started in the Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's Joker. Um, I think uh, for the most part, at least what we saw of Jared Leto's Joker was a complete and utter misfire that we should all sort of lean away from. And I'm glad to see that this is being offered as what appears to be a very high quality alternative.
Again, it's more. I don't really think it's Jared's fault. It's just more of I think the filmmakers didn't really understand how to do the Joker. I get what they were trying to do, and we did talk about this before. How he
in concept it makes sense. In execution and structure, bollocks.
I think the main problem is that they put too many tattoos on him.
I think the straw that breaks the camel's back though is probably the damaged tattoo, like because that screams 90s edgelord if ever I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. I liked the green hair. That was really good because with Heath Ledger's, it was very much. It was darker, like on the highlights that were green, where most of it was very dark.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Nicholson's was fine. It's just more of I don't think.
I think Jack Nicholson played more of a just straight up gangster than he did a Joker.
Yeah.
That's my biggest problem with Jack Nicholson. I think still probably the most definitive Joker is Mark Hamill's. And it will be very interesting to see if Joaquin Phoenix can give Mark Hamill's Joker a run for his money. And I would be totally in favor of that because, like I said, Joaquin Phoenix is one of my favorite actors working today. So
I will say though,
I'd much rather see him as Doctor Strange, but that's neither here nor there.
At some point, Don, you're gonna have to let that go.
Never until they fix it.
Right. One last thing. I think I honestly kind of want to see the joke, like Joaquin's Joker in the purple and green. Don't get me wrong, I'm okay with the burgundy suit and all that. It's just, I think it looked a lot better with like the makeup and stuff. It might have looked. I think it would look better with the purple suit and stuff.
I think if they went with the standard purple and green, it would have resembled Heath's Joker too much, and that's probably why they didn't do it.
Okay.
I like the color scheme they chose for, again, the sort of atmospheric period piece aspect and the sort of color contrast. And to be fair, at least in the Golden Age, the Joker did wear multiple different colors, not just his standard purple and green. Purple and green is the one that they ended up sticking with, and so much the better for it. But because as M. Night Shyamalan managed to convey properly in Unbreakable, the color scheme is meant to be in some way thematic and symbolic. So yay.
Right.
But
okay, okay, so I think that's enough of us rambling. Again, I'm just on the fence about this Joker movie. My opinion might change when I actually see it, and we're going to do a review of that. I know that.
Yeah, the Joker movie, for better or worse, has kind of become our sort of passion project over the course of this podcast. So it'll be interesting to see it finally come to fruition when the movie comes out. I do suspect that even if it's not a particularly grand Joker movie, this is probably going to end up being my favorite movie of the year. I'm fully anticipating that. And if it's
I think you'll. I'm sorry.
If it's as good as the reviews have made it out to be, I fully anticipate that, because the bad reviews that I've seen of the Joker come from an entirely ideologically biased and moralistic worldview. So they aren't really what I would consider valid criticisms. Like there's nothing in the. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I'm not really checking out any reviews or anything. I'm gonna go see it myself and just experience it myself, because I think when I watch reviews of certain things, it does kind of influence my opinion, and I don't want to have that with this movie just yet.
Yeah, I I have the luxury of being able to look at other people's opinions of things and not really be swayed by them because my opinions usually end up being different anyway.
Right. Again, it's for me. I just want to make sure because I've never really put much stock in critics' reviews and stuff,
Hmm.
especially nowadays, obviously.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just on right now. I'm on the fence about this movie, and we'll just I will eat my own words. If it is good, if I truly enjoy it, and I think it is good and all. All right, let's continue on.
Starts out as a troubled but sympathetic ordinary schlub transformed into a charismatic criminal psychopath by bad circumstance and society, which of course we live in. Or, if we're judging strictly by the trailer, what if Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver and Robert De Niro from King of Comedy were the same guy, and also he turns out to be the Joker? I've been looking forward to it with cautious optimism, born of simultaneously thinking, hey, that sounds interesting, and also that could end up being incredibly tiring. Few turnarounds.
Bob, you might be tipping your hand a little bit too much there by just straight up saying that the troubled, chaotic world we live in thing there, Bob. You might be in danger of leaning a little bit too heavily into what we refer to here on the internet as butthurt.
I was gonna say bias, but you know.
Well, it's a particular bias in the form of butthurt, though.
Mm.
It's he got shell-shocked by things not going his way politically and societally, so now he gets to judge everything terrible because bad thing happened.
Right.
That being said, there was nothing particularly wrong with that segment other than you might be tipping your hand a little bit early there, Bob. I agree with you that the movie largely appears to be half Taxi Driver, half King of Comedy, but with a version of Heath Ledger's Joker stuck in the middle there. That appears to be what they were going for. That being said, I can see that going extremely well, and I see no problem with a person of deranged intent being portrayed sympathetically because even crazy people usually have a method to their madness. The crazy takes the form of internally consistent thing that is externally not consistent, i.e., there's something different about the way they perceive the world and how the world actually is. There's nothing wrong with that as long as they're being internally consistent. The only kind of crazy that I wouldn't apply that to is, of course, crazy that happens to be internally inconsistent. But it doesn't appear that's the case. It appears to be, as you say, the Joker is a normal, if mentally unstable slub who gets the shit kicked out of him repeatedly.
Villain's
And
journey.
yes, and unfortunately, that is quite similar to the world in which we live. So much so that I would be willing to constitute the Joker as a men's rights movie if I was so inclined. Um, Obviously, it's not entirely sympathetic because the Joker is a villain, but so are most of the people who commit terrible, terrible crimes. But just because someone is a villain doesn't mean they're incapable of making a logically valid point, or that their suffering is meaningless or invalid. What's invalidating about a terrible person doing terrible things is the terrible things they do, not so much the logic that leads them to it. In other words, you may find situations where the person has the right idea and chooses to go about it in a terrible, terrible way. Moving right along. Banana.
Banana.
Yeah.
In modern film culture, after all, turned out as unpleasantly as watching Heath Ledger and Christopher Nolan's brilliant landmark redefining of this character become twisted by pop culture into just another mimetic, angry, sad boy mascot beloved by people who miss the point of their own supposedly favorite movies. But neither that nor the general tiresomeness of Joker fandom, clown world memes, and oh-so-edgy comic reboots in general can...
Okay, Bob.
Edgy.
Here is where you cross the road from reasonable skepticism all the way into childish, whining, moralistic butthurt. Okay, Bob, you need to understand this thing, right? Okay? There is not a single point in a complex system. There are multiple points within a complex system. It is just possible, Bob, that people who think differently from you will take a different point from a movie than the point you take from it. That does not mean that those people are invalid or wrong, especially not if they are coming from an emotionally damaged point of view. Because, of course, people who are emotionally damaged usually look into art to seek some kind of salvation or resolution. And when you are in a shitty situation, you find yourself relating to people who are derived from a shitty situation. And if you happen to be a nihilist with some absurdist tendencies, then I would imagine your view of the Joker is going to be rather sympathetic, because the Joker's whole point in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight movie was human nature is shit, society is shit, and given the right push, people will be reduced to their animalistic natural tendencies. That is roughly the point of the Joker. The other point of the Joker in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight was the universe is meaningless to the point of being funny and absurd. But that's usually the point of the Joker in every version of the Joker, because that's his MO. His MO is the world is meaningless, but rather than being a straight up cynical nihilist, kind of like yourself, it appears, Bob, the Joker sees the emptiness of existence as a reason to laugh rather than a reason to cry or get angry. And all he wants to do is enjoy the ride and have fun. In other words, he's not interested in watching the world burn because he's angry at the world and wants it to burn. Heath Ledger's Joker is interested in watching the world burn because he thinks it will be fun to go down in flames.
Mm-hmm.
I dare say Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is probably going to be more of the I'm interested in watching the world burn because the world was cruel persona. Mostly because I've seen clips from the movie and he virtually says as much in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah. I'm not sure what he means by the oh so edgy comic reboots in general.
He is upset because people have a different threshold for geekiness than he does. This is the thing with Bob. I think for Bob, his geekiness was a means to contrast himself from people that were mean to him. I don't think he understands the genuine, these things are awesome for their own sake position. And so he sees other people getting hung up on these things are valuable for their own sake position. And he finds that to be naive and mock-worthy. That appears to be one of his most consistent beliefs whenever he's judging other geeks or geek culture in general. He gets annoyed when geek culture is seen as an end in itself rather than a means to an end, because for Bob, it really was a means to an end. People were mean to him, and so he embraced geek culture as a way of getting back at them.
Mm.
Whereas most people embrace geek culture because geek culture kicks ass. But, Bob, you must understand that that means you are a disingenuous fucktard. That does not mean everyone else is a disingenuous fucktard. It simply means that people enjoy things unironically. And once upon a time, Bob, you at least had some understanding of that. You at least had some understanding of the cynical, dismissive, and even nihilistic nature of enjoying things quote unquote ironically. To the point that once upon a time, you made a video. I can't remember if it was on your main YouTube channel or if it was on The Escapist back when you still worked for them the first time, called Dumping Irony. I believe it was actually a big picture episode, which suggests to me it was the early run of The Escapist that you were writing it for. But yes, even you yourself, Bob, at one point said that irony was cynical, paranoid, and stupid, and we should be more sincere about things. And what do you do when you're faced with people actually being sincere? You judge them morally, because why the fuck not? And you default back to using geek culture as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. And in the immortal words of Adam Savage, Bob, well, there's your problem.
Moving on.
Moving on. Banana.
Away from that having been an important performance in a great film. On the other hand,
Are you sweet talking me? I love this guy. He's so intense.
but we shall see. Either way, the film was a big hit at the festival, receiving an 8-minute standing ovation.
Banana.
I don't know. Well, I mean, he was bringing up. I will be honest. There are like one or two scenes in Suicide Squad of the Joker that I do like.
I think the worst part of Jared Leto as the Joker is that he didn't get enough time as the Joker. I think I agree with him in the sense of it's shitty that most of his best material got left on the cutting room floor because they didn't have room for it.
Didn't have room.
This honestly could have been resolved by simply, I don't know, making the Joker the villain of the movie.
Yeah. So the two scenes I do enjoy of the Joker are the one in Arkham Asylum and the one after Harley Quinn is taken to, I believe it's Midway City. In the movie.
I think so.
And like, him doing that creepy laugh with all the knives and stuff around him. It's a nifty scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think his laugh's actually kind of terrifying in a way. Again, I think it's just more of you didn't get to see a lot of him.
I think there's the bones of a good Joker somewhere in Jared Leto's Joker.
But the big problem is that they should have really worked on that design for the character.
Yeah, that, and also, I think that in a lot of places, Jared Leto's mannerisms are too similar to Heath Ledger's, or a version of what Heath Ledger's would have been, so it doesn't really work. I think, if anything, Jared Leto's Joker was a transition phase between the Heath Ledger Joker and the Joaquin Phoenix Joker.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Jared, your version of the Joker was just collateral damage, and I'm sorry, but that is the way the Crown Prince of Crime cookie crumbles. And no, I couldn't say that again if I even wanted to.
Okay. Banana.
Sidebar, guys, when you read about shit like that, it generally means the audience likes the movie enough to not stop clapping for the 8 minutes it took for the cast and crew to come out on stage, bow, begin saying thank you, and sit down, and also receive one of two reactions from the assembled press, according to whom Joker is either a game-changing classic for the ages that restores the serious artistic credibility of superhero genre for grown-ups, will cleanse the box.
And it wasn't before?
Well, I don't think this is Bob's opinion. I think this is his interpretation of other people's opinion. I think we're about to get his opinion jammed into other people's opinion here in about 5 seconds.
I know, it's weird that it's weird how it's phrased is all.
in this point, I'm not going to come down too hard on Bob, because he is right that this is how the critical assembly tends to think of things, and you have to keep in mind that the critical old guard still don't consider comic book movies to be a legitimate genre or a legitimate art form in their own right.
And this is why critics are not well liked.
Yeah, when you will morally arbitrate over people for liking a kind of art that you don't like, or when you will arbitrarily tut about the invalidity of an art form just because you don't consider it normal or valid, you are a piece of shit. No matter how professionally you comport yourself, and no matter how much your opinion is listened to, your opinion is still shit. Please fuck off.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But on that note, banana.
For grown-ups will cleanse the box office of Disney Marvel corporate banality with the purifying holy fires of Scorsese references and self-regarding method acting, should all but certainly net an Oscar nomination for Best Actor and maybe even Best Picture, now that it's okay to do that, and shit, maybe even this one could win since it's more serious. Or, on the other hand, oh my god, this is awful, not another movie about an angry loner being sort of...
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that, again, that first bit there is largely what the forced to be sympathetic to comic book movies critical class tends to be. This next bit, however, is the ideological portion of the program, and this is why I don't really consider a lot of the negative criticism towards the Joker movie very valid, because if there were objective technical failings to be considered, they would probably have pointed at them. But instead, it's all, oh my god, this is framed so horribly because feminism and toxic masculinity,
Okay.
and you can't treat men like the victims because reasons.
I wanted to
Even
bring
though we will try to treat women like the victims in every conceivable circumstance and blame at least masculinity for it.
up. So I wanted to bring up that. Well, he is referencing Black Panther for being Best Picture nomination.
Yeah. Although, to his credit, he points out later on in the video that one of the main reasons why Black Panther was nominated was because of diversity, not its own merits. He actually points that out. Or at least he considers that as a perspective that exists, even though I don't think he holds it.
Right.
Which is more than most people will do, and more than he would usually do under most circumstances. So yay.
Well, I do want to say that Black Panther being in the Oscars, even though it's technically not the greatest, it's not even a really good. It's a typical Marvel movie, all in all.
Yeah.
We have talked about Black Panther once or twice, like really early on in the podcast series.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's still a step in the right direction, because, again, when you're fighting an uphill battle against a bunch of people who don't think you're valid, any victory is a victory at some.
I mostly think they really should. You know, actually, I'm just gonna propose this. If people want me to do a rewrite of Black Panther, let me know.
Yep.
Because I think where it largely fails is, well, mostly I don't really get what the theme of the story is. And
I think what they're going for is, it takes more to be a king than simply holding the title of king. And also that isolationism is bad and joining the world is good.
I'm probably gonna have to, if I ever do a rewrite of Black Panther, I probably am gonna have to redo everything.
Yeah, but at least it won't be as insufferable as Captain Marvel.
That's a pain in the ass. I'm still writing that out, most of the characters.
Yep.
All right, but right, okay. I mean, okay.
Awful, not another movie about an angry loner being sort of justified going nuts that's vaguely similar to what every actual spree killer says about themselves, and it looks like people I personally dislike or whose politics I'm disgusted by are going to like this movie and interpret it to be in some way supportive of them. And how could you think to release this when there's real-world shootings going on and an election coming up and...
Oh, somebody please think of the children!
And the...
Okay, Bob, you get points for that. You get points for at least portraying it as something that people believe rather than something that is the objective truth. And you get more points, at least for me, for mocking their moral sensibilities for it. You get 1 point, Bob. 1 point.
So he only has 1 point, I'm guessing.
Well, it's a new scorecard every time I watch a movie Bob video. But yes, in this instance, Bob, you get 1 point.
Right. Well, no, I'm just saying. Like, I feel like with this video, and then this video in particular, like he only has 1 point. Or I think there were other things we agreed with early on, and it was like I didn't keep track.
I'm not going to count those because, in my opinion, those are just kind of givens. But in this case, given how often Movie Bob himself goes all moralist, I'm willing to give him the point for the sake of, could this be a time when Movie Bob at least developed some self-awareness, or at least that he wants to hold people on his own side accountable for something? Yay, hence the 1 point. Still, that framing is fucked, and I know you're about to go on to defend it, so just for the record, that framing is fucked and completely ideologically driven because feminism stroke toxic masculinity. 2 things, Bob, which are bunkum. I know me saying that to you is like trying to beat my head through a brick wall, but I'm gonna say it anyway because it happens to be logically consistent and true. Banana. Maybe. Assuming that Brainstormer has not left the building. Presumably he is getting food. Do 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 do. I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.
Sorry, I had to have a talk with someone.
Okay.
Weird talk, because apparently I'm the grown-up that has to talk to them.
Yeah. That's one of the problems of being a person who is older than your biological age. When you're the mature one in a situation, you end up being
Okay,
thrust.
I'll let you know. I'll talk to you about it after the stream, Dawn. But
All right.
all right,
Yes,
we got this.
but yes, you get points for framing their moral hysteria like the moral hysteria it is, Bob, because self-awareness is healthy, and I'm going to encourage it by giving you 1 point.
I am kind of, well, the thing is, though, I'm kind of worried that the fact that he's going to backtrack.
Oh yeah, he's going to shamelessly contradict himself in about 5 seconds. But for the sake of Movie Bob's health and for the sake of my health, because of how I react to logical inconsistencies, you get 1 point, and I'm going to encourage this because you correctly identified moralistic hysteria as the moralistic hysteria it is. Yay.
Mm.
Banana.
Okay.
Also, like a
Get a
smattering
cookie.
of the second one, but that also sneaks in. Oh, but yeah, it's also a well-made movie, and they're probably going to give Joaquin an Oscar. Frankly, I've got no idea where I expect to come down on it, though at this point I can offer that I don't consider it a great sign that both the effusive and repulsed reviews are equally describing more or less exactly the movie that I hoped they weren't making out of this, but we'll see. I've been surprised before, and a studio that's managed to put out some...
Oh, so he kind of shares my view, and like I'm just on the fence right now until I see it.
I will say that it's not a good sign that he threw in there, this is exactly the kind of movie I hope they weren't making. To which I would say, yes, Bob, because you are a ideologically driven hack who can't see past his morality for 5 seconds. But again, I gave you 1 point for correctly identifying the hysteria, the moralistic hysteria, as the moralistic hysteria it is. So you're being rather reasonable in this one instance, so I will leave you alone for now.
Mm.
Click. Or rather, banana.
Mm-hmm.
something as perfectly delightful as Shazam and make, well, maybe not a silk purse, but at least a compellingly Gar Spencer's gift backpack out of the sow's ear that was the aborted Snyderverse build-up for Aquaman deserves at least some license to experiment. I'm always wary of the social responsibilities of media question that comes up with these things, and that I tend to have a nuanced view of them. Everyone has a right to free speech. No one has a right to a platform for their...
Okay, Bob.
I would say it's kind of harsh to say. I think he said aborted or.
No, I would say he's being fair, because what he's saying is they managed to make a good thing out of Aquaman despite the absolute shit show that the DCEU was up until that point.
Right, I'm not arguing that fact. It's just more of it's. Say what you want about the Snyder films. I do think there's some good in them. It's just
he's being hyperbolic for the sake of, entertainment and flamboyantness and whatnot. I'm not gonna tone police him for that. However, I am going to logic police you, Bob, because that is what I do. That is a staggering proportion of the things that I do on the internet is logic the shit out of people who apparently forget how to logic periodically because of reasons. Bob, media does not have social responsibility. It is not media's job to police culture or society. It is media's job to create and add to culture and society, i.e., your job is not to make things that will reshape society and culture. Your job is to create things which will be of value to society and culture. That is part of the problem. Secondly, your next little tidbit there. Yes, Bob, no one has the right to a platform, unless, of course, they are given a platform. And the only reason you're making this exception, Bob, is because you find what is being said on a given platform morally objectionable. And far be it from me to be hyper consistent with this, but Bob, your morality, okay, is not a good reason to prevent other people's ability to speak freely. I.e., if people have an audience that would like to hear them, you do not get to deny those people who would like to hear a given person speak the right to hear that person speak. And if they make or provide for themselves a platform such as a YouTube channel, it is irresponsible, in my opinion, of YouTube to demonetize them entirely on moral grounds. By all means, demonetize them and shame them and what have you if they happen to break a law that is reasonable and logically consistent, but not if they violate social mores. Because, Bob, or rather mores, different word. Because, Bob, sometimes the mainstream view of society and morality, right, Bob, is wrong, and it needs to be corrected. And if you go all stone the witch every time someone says something mildly controversial and prevent them from being heard by people who would otherwise like to hear them, you are the problem, Bob. You are the problem in the instance where you would do that. So, yes, I do believe that in this instance, the right to speak includes, to some extent, the right to seek out and utilize whatever tools are at your disposal. Meaning that if you are a public speaker and someone invites you to a public place in order to speak as a public speaker, it is shameful and moralistic of you, i.e., it is you going all think of the children, if you then proceed to want to get that person boycotted. Because the world need not revolve in moralistic terms. It should revolve in logical terms, and where morality and logic contradict each other, morality should be thrown out. The only place where morality has any particular validity, at least in my opinion, Bob, is when morality and logic coincide with each other. But the problem, of course, with moralities that coincide with logic is they can be challenged on logical grounds. And you don't get to get all morally indignant when someone points out that your morality is not the center of the goddamn universe, because it is flawed and inaccurate and logically inconsistent in a lot of cases. Banana.
Mm-hmm. I need to read back to. Hold on. Sorry.
Okay.
There we go.
A right to a platform for their speech. You don't have a right to never hear something that offends you, but you also don't have a right to force someone to hear something that offends them either. It's not an easy thing, and neither is the frustrating and yet immortal question of whether or not it's socially responsible to keep making movies about how fascinating and misunderstood and actually sympathetic lonely white guys who go on philosophically self-aggrandizing murder sprees are, when the real-life version is now such a terrible and regular part of the news.
Again, Bob, that is a completely consequentialist argument. That is not a principled or logically consistent argument. Again, should we stop making movies about Antifa or communism or any other anti-fascist quote-unquote social activism? No, and why not? Because those people have a point and their philosophy should be listened to? Well, guess what, Bob? Your morality is not the center of the goddamn universe, and as such, you don't get to morally prognosticate over whether a given philosophy is valid or not until you've actually considered it. And if someone who has a different position to you decides to make a movie expounding their philosophies or their worldviews in, artistic format, they should have every right to do so in exactly the same way you have every right to be all supportive of every movie that has social justice themes in it. And especially this is the case when the people making the movie don't actually take a position on a given philosophy and all they do is present it. Because that is them, in my opinion at least, doing their job better than someone who takes a biased position on their art. Because, in my opinion, and I know I'm old-fashioned with this, but I see art in the Platonic and Michelangeloian perspective, i.e., it's not the job of the artist to be the clay, it is the job of the artist to shape the clay that already exists, i.e., it is not the artist's job to put themselves in the art. If anything, the job of the artist is the exact opposite. It is your job to act as a channel for art, because art, Bob, is better than the people that create it. That, to me, is the very essence of good art. Art that is more important than the people that create it is my personal definition of good art. And any artist would kill to create a piece of art that is more intricate or worthwhile than themselves. Because otherwise, all they're creating is moralizing propaganda. And yes, Bob, people who have logical positions on things tend to be sympathetic, even if those positions are abhorrent in their own right or would lead to terrible things. Because, Bob, we understand that one of the key features of a human being is their capacity to reason. But you're not interested in sympathy for sympathy's own sake, Bob. You appear to be interested in sympathy as a means to authority, because you understand the notion that sympathy is a way to gain power and influence. But you can only see sympathy in the context of power and influence. That's your problem here. You can't see someone being able to look at a sympathetic character and not immediately want to apply everything that character does or sees or wants. We can understand that there's a logical progression from point A to B without automatically wanting to shift directly into B. Because, of course, the difference between A and B in this instance, in this metaphor, is A is a philosophical position, and B is a bunch of negative consequences that might flow from that philosophical position. And you can agree with a philosophical position without needing to agree to the negative consequences of that logical position. And just because the outcome is undesirable does not change the fact that the person who came up with the philosophy might have well been in their right mind when they did so. Just because I disagree with Marxism and communism does not in any way mean that I want all copies of the Communist Manifesto burnt, because I have no problems with people experiencing the ideology of communism, because I believe that you can argue with philosophies using other philosophies. However, I do have a problem with violent anarcho-communists like Antifa because of the violence inherent in their particular brand of anarcho-communism. And as much as I do believe that my enemy is the idea, not the person committing the idea, so too do I believe that the negative consequences of a given thing are the thing that is to be eradicated, not the ideas themselves. Why? Because I have faith in my own idea's ability to counter a bad idea. But this is the problem. You operate, Bob, in this elitist bubble where any idea is equally valid, and therefore no idea can be reasonably argued against, because logic is just an arbitrary illusion or a naive social construct. See, I don't believe that, Bob. I think logic is one of the most hard and fast facets of reality, such as it is. Therefore, I have no fear of communism, because I know I can argue against communism. I have no fear of extreme capitalism, because I know I can argue against the extremes of capitalism. And I have no fear of logically inconsistent sociological woo-woos, because their sociological woo-woo-ness can be argued against. The only point at which I have an issue is when someone decides that their morality is completely and totally unassailable, and therefore any argument against them is either naive and invalid or immoral. And you would be fucking amazed, Bob, how many times people have told me, you can't argue with that because that makes you either immoral or stupid. So many times, Bob. And I wouldn't imagine that you would be able to understand that, because oftentimes, Bob, unfortunately, it is you who is making those kind of pronouncements. And it sickens me. and apparently makes my dog noisy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
News cycle. What it tends to come down to for me on the whole glamorizing characters like the Joker thing, which again, maybe the movie does, maybe not, don't know yet, just talking about the reactions and the speculations here, is that separate from whether or not a socially irresponsible movie can still be a good movie on the filmmaking side, I would say yes, it can be. In my view, there's a difference between glamorizing vice and on.
Okay. Point to Bob again, because he actually made the distinction. A morally repugnant movie is not a evaluatively repugnant movie. Well played, Bob. Now, I would take that point away from you if I honestly expected you to follow through on that position. But again, it's more like just rewarding a child for good behavior. You came to the right position, irregardless of your entire other ideological framework. So, here is your metaphorical cookie, Mr. Shipman. Please don't make me regret giving it to you. As though I expect you not to make me want to regret giving it to you in about 5 seconds.
Honestly depicting vice that a certain segment of the audience already glamorizes for themselves. To borrow a metaphor from Chris Rock.
Drug dealers don't sell drugs. Drugs sell themselves. It's crap. It's not an encyclopedia. It's not a vacuum cleaner. You don't really gotta try to sell crack, okay? I never heard a crack dealer go, man, how am I gonna get rid of all this crack?
One thing that's a joke, and as Dalton usually puts it, most comedy comes from truth.
Yes. Although, to be fair to Bob, he is actually making a somewhat decent point here. What he's saying is, you don't need to derive a message from art in order to want to follow through on that message if you're already predisposed to that message. I.e., if a violent person is inclined to do violence, then you can't really blame someone showing them the Joker for that violence. Which, again, is a very good point, Bob, for once. That being the case, however, Bob, I see nothing wrong with the Joker's philosophy. What I have a problem with, well, at least not yet, because I haven't actually heard what this particular iteration of the Joker's philosophy is going to be. My issue is doing the violent shit that the Joker does. In the same way as I can appreciate Ted Kaczynski's manifesto while still acknowledging he is a murderous fuckwit. But I don't blame his philosophy for turning him into a murderous fuckwit. He can still have a valid point while being a murderous fuckwit, just not while he's being a murderous fuckwit. I.e., I'm not going to listen to him when he tells me that person over there needs to be blown the fuck up in Ted Kaczynski's case. And I'm not going to listen to the Joker when he says we need to burn society down. But I can still respect that he has a philosophy that led him to that position, and that philosophy may on its own terms be valid. What I mean to say, Bob, is just because someone finds something worthwhile in the Joker doesn't mean they are repugnant human beings. Because what they find value in the Joker might not be his actions or his solutions to his problems. It might just be that they are willing to acknowledge that the problems exist. And therein lies the difference between people like me and people like you, Bob, because to you, admitting that there is a problem with, say, men's issues would mean that we all need to be like the Joker and basically burn down society. However, most people who actually deal with men's issues, like myself, I consider myself an MRA, deal with it, understand that men's issues can be a valid subject matter without necessarily resulting in, so we need to burn down everything and restart society with men on top. That's not a valid conclusion based on those inputs, but those inputs do exist. Your issue, Bob, is you're having a hard time differentiating between a subject matter and the conclusions other people draw based on that subject matter. Just because you admit that, say, society is absurd, or that men's issues exist, or that suffering makes people into terrible people, just because you allow for those three axioms, Bob, that will not turn you into the Joker. If you were to say tomorrow, wake up, Bob, and understand that circumcision is barbaric, no matter how surgically clean and clinically precise it happens to be performed in a manner of, just because you admit that to yourself does not mean you're going to turn into Walking Phoenix Joker. Just because you admit that men often get screwed in child custody battles does not mean that's going to turn you into the Joker. And just because you admit that society is sometimes cruel and turns otherwise good people into monsters doesn't mean you need to admit to being one of those monsters. Unless you can't differentiate between someone's actions and the philosophies that lead someone to those actions. I.e., I would suspect, Bob, if I were to show you videos of Antifa punching a motherfucker out, would not blame communism for that Antifa member punching a motherfucker out. Because you would understand that that's not a direct correlate from communism. Likewise, I might agree with the Joker on a philosophical or even political level without wanting to go and burn and torture people, because those things are correlated but not causative in this instance, do you see? And the only solution when those correlations are made is just break up the correlation, admit that philosophies don't directly lead to actions, and move on with your life. But if you did that, you probably wouldn't have a job now, would you? Because that probably would make you an MRA, and Lord knows how the media class reacts to the term MRA, don't they? Banana.
Okay.
Notably, Joker openly flaunts its connection to the films of Martin Scorsese, modern cinema's master of movies about villain protagonists who we understand are bad guys, but we also get to one degree or another why their bad guyness was an appealing road to take, even as the films never actually stop pointing out what's actually happening and why we're not supposed to root for it. And part of why he...
Fair enough. Banana.
Right.
is good at that, Scorsese, I mean, is that he has a genuine in touch with my own dark side understanding that he doesn't need to cheat in order to make the excesses of Henry Hill's gangster life in Goodfellas or Jordan Belfort's debauchery in The Wolf of Wall Street look fun. Being a big shot gangster, being rich as hell, hanging out with your friends all day, doing whatever you want and getting away with it, having a sick yacht, doing tons of coke, being married to...
Again, I applaud your attempt to at least understand the logic, Bob. I really hope this lasts. I really hope you begin to understand why this applies to situations other than this one situation. Because this is exactly the kind of argument that people have been making to you for a very, very long time when you go a little bit overboard on the moralism and the feminism. So, God, I hope this lasts, but then again, because you're you, I do not think it will. And no, that's not me ad hominem you or trying to invalidate you as a person, Bob. It's just, I have seen a lot of your content, and a lot of your content suggests to me that this is very much a one-off. But, at any rate, banana.
No.
Margot Robbie flying in planes full of strippers, those all sound fun already. You don't have to sell that. That's pre-sold. People already want those things. Some people. That's why they aspire to become. That's why these characters happen in the first place.
I still love the life. We were treated like movie stars with muscle. We had it all. Just
Again, well done, Bob. I really hope this isn't an isolated incident, but bitter experience tells me it probably is.
Right. Okay.
Just for the asking. Our wives, mothers, kids, everybody rode along. I had paper bags filled with jewelry stashed in the kitchen. I had a sugar bowl full of coke next to the bed. I'm not ashamed to admit it. When we arrived at prison, I was absolutely terrified.
Again, this is just a Goodfellas clip, and Goodfellas is an awesome movie, so I'm not going to take issue with him using it here, especially not when he's using it to make an actually reasonable point. Yay.
But I need to admit. See, for a brief, fleeting moment, I'd forgotten I was rich.
And likewise, even though their respective movies do in fact make it crystal clear that people like Tyler Durden, the Joker, Thanos, Gordon Gekko, etc. are assholes whose philosophies are evil bullshit,
Okay, see, this is where you go wrong, pal. Yes, I would agree that those movies do indicate that those people are assholes. However, because it portrays their philosophies accurately, I don't think it's passing a moral judgment on those philosophies. And even if it were, even if the movies themselves were passing a moral judgment onto a given philosophy, that's just the movie being biased. That doesn't actually indicate the substance of the philosophy or lack thereof. Well, i.e., just because Gordon Gekko is an asshole doesn't mean that you shouldn't subscribe to Randian objectivism or minarchist libertarianism or even anarcho-communism. And just because Mussolini is an asshole or any number of other communists are assholes doesn't necessarily invalidate communism. Philosophies are invalid or valid on their own merits, and the consequences of those philosophies really only go so far as to tell you how those philosophies are being applied. But the way a philosophy is applied is separate still from the philosophy itself. You can still make a point with a philosophy that has ultimately bad outcomes, because what you should be interested in terms of philosophies is not necessarily the outcomes. The outcomes can be a correlate, i.e., it is the consequences and outcomes of a philosophy are data, but when dealing in the realm of philosophy, your main weapon should be logic, i.e., is this philosophy logically consistent or does it leave more to be desired? My conclusion to those philosophies, Bob, would be those philosophies are missing components and are logically inconsistent. It has not. I don't need the consequences of Tyler Durden's actions to demonstrate to me that his philosophy is bunk. I can look at his philosophy in isolation and still see that it is bunk. And even if I couldn't, the movie's biased portrayal of that philosophy would not convince me that that philosophy is bunk, because I can differentiate between what people want to say and what is actually present. Meaning, it doesn't matter how biased you present something, if you're presenting that thing incorrectly for the sake of the bias, someone somewhere is going to call you on it. Because you should battle philosophies on philosophical grounds, not consequential ones.
You know, we technically had the conversation yesterday. Sorry, eating ice cream. But I was saying, like, we had this conversation about like character philosophies yesterday. Obviously, we weren't arguing against Moving Bob with this, but we did talk about it, and there is credit to each philosophy of a villain or antagonist or whatever.
Yeah. Just
Granted, you don't have
just because a person is crazy or stupid or in some way warped doesn't prevent them from occasionally making a good point. And just because a philosophy is negatively impactful doesn't mean that it's not based on something that is logical. consistent and or true.
Right. I mean, granted, I still don't agree with Thanos and what he did in Infinity War.
No, it's still a bad way of going about the solution to the problem. But what you appear to be doing or implying with this movie, Bob, is in order to prevent people from acting like Thanos, we should just not ever talk about overpopulation as a thing. And likewise, with the Joker, a lot of people in the critic space appear to be saying, in order to prevent people from acting like the Joker, we just need to pretend like men's issues are never a thing, or mental health issues are never a thing, or people we've defined as privileged and lucky in all circumstances can never suffer because we say so, and we should just ignore all the suffering those people do actually go through, because if not, we'll be enabling them to do terrible, terrible things.
Oh.
Yeah, it's an extremely stupid position that you appear to be teetering on the edge of, Bob, and to your credit, you are teetering on the edge of it, but a lot of your contemporaries are not teetering on the edge of it and have gone full moralist. And those people are fucking stupid. Ignoring a problem is not going to prevent that problem. And embracing the existence of a problem is not going to lead to the negative impacts of that problem, at least not exclusively.
You know, I would argue that ignoring the problem obviously makes the problem escalate into something that you have to take notice eventually.
Yeah. And moreover, as has become a pop psychological cliche at this point, the first step to fixing a problem is admitting that you have a problem. And I would amend that with and accurately portraying the problem. Because of course, feminists will admit that mass murder is a problem, but they will blame it on things like toxic masculinity and male entitlement as opposed to male suffering or the discrepancy between women's rights and men's rights, or the conflation between women's rights and feminism, which are not the same thing and never have been.
Mm-hmm.
Should never follow. If the characters are rendered authentically and true to life, you're gonna have a few dense idiots who decide to listen to what they're saying because that's who listens to cult leaders in real life. So will Joker have an annoying fan base? I mean, probably, yeah, but what doesn't today? My Little Pony had its version of a psycho fan base in the 21st century. We've crossed this Rubicon a long time ago, and it's...
Okay, Bob, once again, this is your problem. You appear to be taking a nuanced position on this, but you still appear to be conflating anyone who finds any philosophical value in the Joker with a quote-unquote dense idiot. Idiots are not the only people who think differently from you, Bob. That is you assuming that you have the one right answer and that you are inherently smarter than everyone who thinks differently from you. To which I say, fuck off, Bob. You're teetering on the edge of making a good point, but you keep having to assert your own intellectual dominance and philosophical purity all over your otherwise good point. Idiots are not the only people who will sympathize with the Joker or his philosophy. Idiots are the people who are going to take his philosophy to the extremes that he takes it in the course of the movie. Those people you can definitely call idiots. Anyone who would commit mass murder over a philosophy is an idiot, regardless of their philosophy. Unless they are reacting to something extremely, extremely oppressive. Like, for example, V from V for Vendetta. Given that he was fighting authoritarian fascism, yeah, his actions are somewhat justified. But even without the extreme consequences and extreme circumstances, the kind of classical Lockean liberalism espoused in the V for Vendetta movie, which is different from the comic, are still worthwhile. And as much as I hate nihilism, absurdism, and postmodernism, I can see how the philosophy of the Joker, being as absurdist and very much postmodern as it is, could inspire or be relatable to some people. And I will take issue with them on philosophical grounds by arguing with them, but there's nothing inherently stupid about a person who finds that worthwhile. What's stupid is if they choose to then act on that philosophy by killing people. That would very much be stupid. But no, the philosophies of people you disagree with, Bob, are not inherently stupid. Some of the actions that some people might do as a result of them are stupid, but you can find reasons for killing people in just about every philosophy you want to if you look hard enough and you are that warped or that much under pressure. Banana.
It's not really something you can hold against the property in 99% of cases. Now, as for the award season stuff, God, do I really have to do that already? Okay, assuming it's as good as the positive reviews have said it is, and I have no reason to doubt either way, it wouldn't shock me to see Joker as an Oscar contender, maybe even Best Picture, mostly because make this a Best Picture contender seems to have been the plan from its inception. The Band-Aids.
Okay, see, Bob, this is where you and I disagree. You think there is 1% of cases that you can blame the property for any terrible things that its viewers do. I disagree, Bob, because again, I don't think it's the philosophies that lead people to do shitty things. I think there are some philosophies that are more likely to lead people to doing shitty things, but even philosophies that lead people to do shitty things should be voiced and should be vocalized and should be studied and should be espoused if they want to be espoused. The point at which we need to stop people is when they want to take those philosophies and do terrible things. I.e., someone is perfectly allowed to agree with the policies of Nazism. There's nothing wrong with them philosophically identifying as a Nazi. Where I would take issue is when they start establishing a Reich here in the real world. That is where I draw the line. You may be a Nazi all day long, but you may not be establishing a Reich ever. That is my difference, Bob. Again, it's not the philosophy, it's how people interpret and enact that philosophy that is the issue. Even really terrible philosophies that really don't have any margin for error or interpretivism about them can be established as long as they are not acted upon in the negative ways they are traditionally acted upon. You can believe the Jews are evil all day long. My issue is when you start killing Jews. And I would never tell someone who honestly hated Jews to stop hating Jews. What I would do is I would argue with their hatred, and I would hold them accountable if ever they started killing Jews as a result of their Jew hatred, or discriminating against Jews as a result of the Jew hatred, etc. People's actions can be judged, people's philosophies should be argued.
Mm-hmm.
Banana.
Though I did want to, we're going to talk about the like it was made to be an Oscar, kind of an Oscar bait film from the start, or is that something you kind of agree with?
It's not an unreasonable position, and I really have nothing to argue
Okay.
about it with. So,
And the fact that he brings up he brings up Black Panther again,
mm-hmm.
I can picture, but you know, it's
Yeah, he's going to get to it. So I'm just going to let him get to it.
well,
But,
I'm just gonna bring out the point that I don't really care. I've never really cared about the Oscars because I think it's kind of all a bunch of pretentious bullshit.
unfortunately, it didn't start out that way, but that's what it's mostly become.
Right. And also, I don't need to be told what movies are good because I decide what movies are good to myself.
Then again, there's always going to be some kind of consensus because if a large group of people agree that a movie is good or that a movie is bad, that's still going to impact something.
True. Okay.
But
Been ripped off comic book movies as Best Picture nominees. What can we do to get the trophy for being the first to win one? Let's try making other movies that have been contenders before again, but with super person face paint and see if that works. Again, assuming it's worth nominating, I'd be pretty stoked to see it in there just to shake things up. I mean, anything's better than Green Book. Though I'd be curious to see if it cuts similar back to Black Panther, i.e. will the same critics who said that nomination.
well played, Bob. I agree. Green Book was terrible. And it was the most pretentious slog there could ever be, honestly. Except for maybe three billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri. That I hated even worse. I haven't rooted for a movie in the Oscars since Shape of Water. I suspect that if Joker does get nominated for an Oscar, I will start rooting for Joker come Oscar season. I only really watch the Oscars when I have a movie to root for.
How often is that?
Again, not very often. In 2013, I rooted for her because her is fucking awesome. In, I believe it was 2016, Shape of Water got nominated. It might have been 2017.
I think it was 2017 that movie came out.
Huh?
I think it was 2017 that movie came out.
Yeah. So whatever year of the Oscars it got nominated for, I rooted for Shape of Water. And I suspect that when Joker gets nominated for an Oscar, if it does, I will be rooting for Joker. Especially because, like I keep saying, I really enjoy the works of Joaquin Phoenix, and it is a darn shame he has not yet won as many Oscars as he deserves.
Right. Do you have anything to say about it being the whole? I'm trying to ask. Whole thing he says here about making other movies that have been contenders before, again, but with super person face paint. Or do you think that's accurate?
I'm sure some very, very cynical asshole in the movie making business did think that when Joker was being pitched, so he's forgiven for pointing that out. Because again, I don't think that's Bob's position. I think that's his interpretation of the cynical asshole-ish behavior that takes place in Hollywood. And in fairness to him, that is probably pretty accurate to someone somewhere's position on things. That being said, I don't think Joker is simply a Scorsese movie or a Oscar-winning movie that got a facelift or anything.
Okay.
I could, of course, be wrong, and I would be very disappointed to be wrong, but I think the Joker is its own animal. But at any rate, banana.
To see if it cuts similar flack to Black Panther, i.e. will the same critics who said that nomination shouldn't count as a win for the superhero genre because it was, in their view, nominated for its diversity rather than its superhero merits, also claim that Joker should have an asterisk because its whole conceit is to not be a comic book movie as much as possible. For what it's worth, I would concede that it does seem a bit unfair that films in this genre tend to only get taken seriously when they discard everything unique and special about the genre. And I
Okay, there you got 2 points. You got points for acknowledging the diversity push for Black Panther as a valid perspective, and you got a point for essentially saying what I've been saying this entire time, which is comic book movies are valid in their own right. They don't need to cave to the parameters of other movies. That being said, I disagree with you that the Joker is necessarily doing that. To an extent, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but there's nothing uncomic booky about the Joker, at least yet, that I've seen. And we were just discussing that, so obviously there is a distinction there. But yes, I agree with you on the broader point, Bob. I wish the movies that got nominated for Oscars were the most comic booky they could possibly be, given they're in the comic book movie genre. But given the Joker looks very good and does appear to be in the parameters of comic book movie, I'm willing to take the win and make a few sacrifices. I do broadly agree with you on the point, though, which is why I gave you the point. So well done, Bob. You have made 3 valid points or rather, you have gained 3 points through the course of this video, which is much higher than you usually do, from me at least.
Banana?
Did feel that way about Logan as well, though they didn't end up nominating Logan. Anyway, I guess we're going to find out together, because whatever Joker ultimately is, we're still a month out from the punchline. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.
All things considered, for a movie Bob video, that was pretty good.
Well, I mean, it's also from The Escapists, too, so...
Yeah. It's still pretty bad. I mean, there was plenty of criticism there, but he did bother making at least 3 reasonable concessions, so yay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do we have any final thoughts, or...
I'm really looking forward to the Joker. I really hope that the ideological woo doesn't get so much in the way that it tanks the movie's success. Although I suspect that given that the vast majority of the negative criticisms that I've seen leveled at Joker have to do with ideological woo-woo feminist reasons rather than actual pertaining to the art in and of itself reasons. I suspect that this movie is gonna. I honestly suspect that not only is this gonna be the best movie of the year, this is gonna do gangbusters at the box office and is largely going to be considered a classic of the comic movie genre come about 10 years from now.
Mm.
And I hope to God this is the movie that wins Joaquin his much deserved Oscar. Because A, Joaquin deserves an Oscar, goddammit.
Mm.
And B, if this is the movie that wins Joaquin the Oscar, then that will go down in history. And so much the better if it's as good as it looks. It is possible that I could come out hating the Joker movie. From some of the clips of it that I've seen, there are moments where it's a little bit too much on the nose. But I suspect that those are probably one-offs and that I will end up liking the movie more than I dislike it. And what's more, as someone who willingly identifies themselves as a men's rights advocate, I could see this being spun as a men's rights movie, and we kind of need that now.
I hope for one thing, and it's going to be a weird thing. I'm sure you'll think it's weird going. I hope when they do the stand-up routine scenes, I hope Joaquin can actually do those things. Do it. Like, actually make it work.
Well, but I think one of the jokes, for lack of a better term, about the Joker movie is that the character is bad at stand-up comedy, no matter how much he wants to do it. So I don't know to what extent I'm expecting Joaquin to actually be funny. I know he can be funny. He's funny in most of the things I've seen him in when he wants to be. But
yeah.
I think because part of the joke of the Joker is him not being funny, it would kind of miss the point if he was effectively funny.
And you know what I have to say about the Joker movie?
Is it that it's just a laughing matter?
Smile.
Though your heart is aching,
Smile.
smile.
Even
Even
though
though
it's
it's
broken.
broken.
When there are
Clouds
clouds in the sky, you get by if you smile.
Smile
So
through
no
your
fear
fear
and
and
sorrow,
sorrow.
smile,
Smile,
and
and
maybe
maybe
tomorrow
tomorrow you
see the
see
sun
the light
shining through.
for you.
Sorry, folks. I don't want to get hit with some type of copyright strike for playing that music. But I knew I wanted to play that at some point.
I really, really hope that's in the actual movie. Same thing with "Send in the Clowns" by Frank Sinatra. I really hope that is also in the movie because those are excellent songs for the Joker, and more to the point, if they weren't in the movie, where's the fun in that?
By a rendition of Joaquin Phoenix.
No, I'm just saying that if those songs weren't in the movie, where's the fun in that? And
Oh, I thought you were talking about like there's
no,
a
no, I was trying to make a meta joke.
I actually have a playlist for well, I did, but apparently I do not now. Fortunately. But I had like one or two songs where I was doing like doing a writing script for a Joker spec script. Well, I say Joker, but it was something else.
Was it Trip or Trick? Your
No.
Joker?
It was it was like a Earth 3 fan script for the hero version of Joker, Red Hood.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, I think I scrapped it though. Well, it was mostly on the fact that I really wasn't sure where to go with it.
Ah,
I wrote the opening, which I think was the best part of it.
Probably.
And I just kind of stopped. I couldn't really think of anything else to do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
But
Well,
on that note, I guess that's the end of this one shot.
yeah, an hour and well, a little over an hour, which is kind of short for us.
Well, I mean, if you wanted to, we could actually go to Rotten Tomatoes and look at some of the Rotten reviews to see.
Mm, you know what? No, let's. I think we should save that for the actual review of the movie.
Alrighty,
Yeah.
cool.
But
So I guess that's it for us today, folks. And remember, put on a happy face.
and with that, we bid you adieu, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, goodbye, aloha, adios.
Au revoir and fuck off.
Cheers.